Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A. Hopefully you're all having a great week so far. We're going to dive into all of the latest in the world of Star Wars news. Make sure if you haven't subscribed yet, you are subscribed to the channel. We do this every single week. So if you are new and you would like to join us for these live Q&As every Tuesday, 7 p.m.-ish Pacific time, we go live and we take your guys' questions. So if you're interested in that type of thing, make sure you join us. This week, we have a much bigger thing to talk about, and that is the trailer drop for Maul, Shadow Lord. Kind of came out of nowhere. The last few, it was really kind of teased for a minute that we were getting this trailer coming, and this time it just dropped. So we're going to talk about Maul, Shadow Lord trailer number 2, and we're also going to break down the episode names which were revealed by Disney and Lucasfilm. We have all 10 of them revealed, so we're going to talk about maybe what they mean, what could mean for the arc of the show itself, and how the show will overall work. But you guys know the drill. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. It really does help out our channel. And subscribe again for more content just like this. Make sure you're checking out all our other content. We did post a trailer reaction yesterday for Maul Shadow Lord trailer number 2. So if you're interested in checking out our initial reactions, our initial thoughts, make sure you check out that video. It is up on the channel. We have shorts coming out twice a week, every week. We have polls twice a day, every day. So we have tons of content here on Star Wars Lads. Make sure you check it all out. Also, if you have not checked out our Patreon and YouTube membership programs, make sure you do so. We do have a variety of great perks on those platforms. So if you would like to check out those and see if there's even more content from Star Wars Lads that you'd like to see, check those out and see if there is one that's right for you. All right, without further ado, let's get into the first topic here tonight, and that is going to be the Maul Shadow Lord trailer. So, like I said earlier, it did drop with a new poster that we got on what was yesterday, Monday. We got the new poster, we got the new trailer. This time, really going all in on horror. The trailer was just jam-packed with horror cliches and horror trailer cliches. I really enjoyed that. As a huge horror guy, that was really fun to me. I'm interested to see if that specific vibe, that specific tone carries through the entire show, or if it's just for the marketing. But regardless, what we've noticed between trailer 1 to trailer 2 is that both of them are very violent, both of them are very intense, and both of them have a lot of action. And I'm really looking forward to a faster paced, really action-packed animated series from Star Wars, because Bad Batch, as good as it was, definitely had the Rebels kind of plotting, where it had important plot points in the beginning, important plot points in the middle, and important plot points in the end, and everything else was kind of character dynamics, or a small mission here, a small mission there. Some would use the word filler. I think a lot of those times, while they can feel like filler, by the time you get to big payoffs, those small moments helped you get more attached to certain characters. So it had that style of plotting, which is the antithesis of the Clone Wars, which is short arcs. Everything kind of matters because you're telling an individual arc each time. Well, Maul Shadow Lord seems to be kind of right in the middle. It's a shorter show, only 10 episodes, but the action looks so good, and the animation has never looked better. Sonic, you didn't get to join me for the reaction itself yesterday, but what are your overall thoughts on trailer number 2 for Maul Shadow Lord?
Like you said, I continue to be impressed by the painterly effect that they're really using, not just in the fights now, but landscapes and the action itself. Like that one shot where you like kind of dive into frame, like it just, yes, it's so good. And like you mentioned, and I think I also brought it up, like the horror elements. I mean, if we are doing like a horror styled mall show, that would work. I find it really funny just where he is in terms of the timeline right now. Like, is horror exactly what he's going for, right? Like, he's not like the demon incarnate, right? When we see him in the Phantom Menace, he's more of a Sisyphus. He's really just continuously struggling and failing. And I guess right now is after arguably his biggest failure, right? The Empire has been created without him. and now he's like, it's not really what I was looking forward to anyways. So yeah, I'm very curious about like where exactly the tone of this is going to be, especially with this one having shots of Marok with the hand on the shoulder and appearing from the darkness. The 11th brother, nicknamed the Crow, also shows up quite a bit. There's some slightly reused shots of like the Night Brothers and stuff, I think, when you're flying around and having them shoot like RPGs and stuff. But for the most part, I was like, yeah, like this looks great. And the fight with Devin too, like, and I'm assuming some sort of bullet train, high speed sort of situation. Seeing the lights above, like how it's flickering and all that, really cool, right? And for me, it's just there's a part of me that almost doesn't like it, just because it's like, oh no, I'm so used to the Clone Wars style. Just raise that up to 11. But this is the way to distinguish shows if this is gonna be the way to like continue building out something that's already been developed, right? Just giving it updates as opposed to making a whole new animation style. Again, I do want us to like say like stuff in New Republic era, in post sequel era, all gets to have its own visual style when it comes to animation. That is something I'll always applaud Resistance for, even if there isn't much story past parts of season one for me that I really found super appealing. But like stuff like that, I don't want us to just be stuck in this visual. But if we're gonna do it this way with this heightened feeling, and yeah, all of that looked really cool to me. So I'm a big fan of it. uh, I think the question now becomes just how much more are they going to show us next, right? Like, I think we've already seen a lot of things in that first trailer that this trailer is just only taking up more into that almost like genre like tone. Now it's like, okay, you've given us all that, a little bit more of the story, perhaps a little bit more of Lawson, especially. Like he does get a little bit more here, but I wouldn't say it's anything super significant. And I'm just seeing fans online say like, oh, Shadow of Maul issue one is like so big for like getting you into the world, setting the feeling of it all. So now I really want to catch up on that and read that. But I want to know more about the plot. We've only gotten like the intrigue so far, and we've gotten to tease in such many different ways. But what comes next? Like, are we gonna finally see something in a TV spot or something that really pops out story wise and like maybe makes sense of why this world is so far not super empire occupied and elements like that? I don't know. I mean, they don't have to, but that's just something I've kind of come to be a little bit more used to by the time we get around to just before the season airs. So far, this feels like one of the few trailers where I'm like, I'm not really sure about many of the plot threads quite yet. But well, overall, very, very pleased with what we're seeing out of this. I think this could be a very definitive show for Maul, and that's saying something with how the Clone Wars did so much to quite literally revive him. But this could be really big for really setting up, the Crimson Dawn arc that was teased and started in Solo, but never has really gone anywhere with Maul as the figurehead. Mostly it's been stuff with Kira. So yeah, very, very excited.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I couldn't be more excited for this show, I don't think. Originally, when they announced it last year, it felt like a surprise, but it also just felt like, are they being a little bit too desperate with, like, how do we go back to the Clone Wars well over and over and over again, as many times as we possibly can? Let's do Clone Wars again and again and again. But once we saw some marketing, and we saw the leaked trailer originally, and it looked pretty good, and I had confidence in it from the creative team, from the fact that the Bad Batch was really good, from the fact that they really haven't made, this core creative team has not made a really bad series so far when it comes to, especially when it comes to Disney Plus. Resistance might be the only Lucasfilm animation series that people would say could be classified as bad, but that wasn't a Disney Plus series. So like in this regime, they've been pretty solid overall. So I was pretty confident in the creative team. I was pretty confident in Maul, Sam Witwer, all the things they were saying about it. But these trailers have just taken me over the top to where, like, I have a hard time saying this is my most anticipated Star Wars thing of the year. And I know we've talked about this before, because it does feel like the smallest scale out of the big three that are coming out this year between Mandalorian and Grogu and Ahsoka Season 2. But this looks so good, and I just keep getting amazed every time I see it. The action, the updates to the visuals, the way they've added this kind of glow and after shadow to the movements of Maul, to his lightsaber, it adds to the horror elements. It kind of, at times looked a little bit similar to some of the effects they use on K-pop Demon Hunters and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that kind of stutter that's in their animation. They brought some of that to this while also using the best looking and nicest version of the Clone Wars animation we've ever seen. So I think this just looks like it's going to be a great, fun ride. I'm getting kind of Tales of the Jedi vibes from this, where if it's only one season, it's going to be something that everybody remembers. And people are going to say, why can't they make more shows like Maul Shadow Lord? If it's multiple seasons, hopefully it becomes the second best or third best Star Wars TV show ever, because I think there's room for me to take down Bad Batch as good as it was. And if this is like elite all-time Star Wars, it could take down Rebels and something like that to become one of the best animated Star Wars shows. So absolutely love this. I think it looks so good. But let's talk about the titles themselves, because we got a reveal for the titles of Maul Shadow Lord's episodes. So here we go. We've got 5 weeks of Maul Shadow Lord, which was the only disappointment of the show, to be honest. But 5 weeks, 2 episodes a week. Starting on April 6th, we have Chapter 1, The Dark Revenge, and Chapter 2, Sinister Schemes. April 13th, Week 2, we have Chapter 3, Whispers in the Unknown, and Chapter 4, Pride and Vengeance. April 20th, Chapter 5, Inquisition, Chapter 6, Night of the Hunted, and April 27th, Chapter 7, Called to the Oblivion, and Chapter 8, The Creeping Fear, excuse me. And then finally, May 4th will be the finale, Chapter 9, Strange Allies, and Chapter 10, Finale. Lots of cool names here. Obviously, one of the big ones, Chapter 5, Inquisition. Might be the time we see the Inquisitors show up. This trailer gave a lot more plot away with the fact that Maul is going to be teaming up with these Jedi. I'm assuming that kind of starts in the first episode with Dark Revenge. I think Dark Revenge will start as like a Maul-centric episode. We'll catch up with where he was in the first episode in the final episode of Clone Wars, before getting to where he will ultimately go into this city. I think it's going to start and kind of show why he picks this place to end up, show the violence. Maybe that's where we start with the Knight brothers, because we don't see them a whole lot in the trailers, but it would be interesting if he retreated early after the Clone Wars into finding, some of his members of his family, and then coming back and using them to help build his early stages of his criminal empire. So I think that would be pretty cool. I think Chapter 2 will probably be the episode that catches us up with Wagner Moura's character and kind of gets the detective side of the story going, the cat and mouse between Maul and him. And then I see the rest of the show kind of linking into the Imperial stuff, and ultimately, when we get to the end, I do think she's going to become Talon, and we'll get that final reveal that she is Darth Talon. But yeah, Sonic, what do you think of the episode names, the release strategy, and which ones sound the most interesting to you?
Let me pull it up here on my phone. I mean, like you said, Inquisition. I really want to know what's going on in Morocco, because Morocco is, he's all hype and aura. And then remember Ahsoka season 1, episode 2, got a couple quick skirmishes. And then once we finally get around to, I believe, episode 4, right? I think it's 4, where they actually have the proper duel in the forest. It's like, oh, okay, like we're finally going to see something about this character. And then the thing that actually ended up happening that people were joking about, like, what if it's really nobody? What if it's just literally just hype, and then the moment he gets struck down, it just disappears? It literally happened. Like, and you can say, yes, it's Night Sister magic and all that, but I am very curious to see, especially with this trailer, which how much more emphasis there was on Marok, how we're gonna like treat him. Like, is he really gonna be that guy? Is he really going to be, a character that is richer, maybe is someone that's threatening for, top dog for Grand Inquisitor, right? If we're gonna really build off of stuff that we see in other shows, I'd love to see Riva not just be that first Inquisitor trying to become Grand Inquisitor. I'd love to see a couple other upstarts and not ones that are having their own little small dynamics and all that. And the way he's just seemingly fighting off Maul and Devin, he doesn't seem like a joke, right? Like I don't think there's anything super bad about his fighting, but it was very simplistic when we saw it in his actual fight with Ahsoka. The skirmish they had a little bit more potential, but the actual fight, I was like, oh, it just became a samurai duel, and it was that was it. But this, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm liking it. Like he's very agile, he's very active. I'm not really sure how much you can really do with the 11th brother. I feel like he's gonna be kind of like the 4th sister in Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he's just kinda there for his aesthetic more than anything here, and then we know he dies in Tales of the Jedi, or is he the first example of reviving, right? Like, that's another big thing, right? Like, is he what eventually Maraka is gonna become, right? Or some imperfect version of that because we don't really see any green smoke and gas, so that I'm very, very excited about. I wanna see how the Inquisitors fit in. I wanna see Maul really start to establish that, like, numero uno, on in their hit list vibe, right? That's really present in the season 2 finale of Rebels, right? Like, this is a show that, like you're saying, it could be a one season off thing and could be done, but it has potential to, like, just have so many different threads, connect to so many different ideas, and just things that have been developed over, like, the last 12, 13 years, especially with this character, how much he has grown even more under the Disney regime. So, yeah, I'm excited really for that one. Um, Strange Allies, I mean, I don't know. I think that one feels like it's almost like Lawson or somebody else kind of finally comes into the picture directly working with and choosing a side, right? Like I think he's somebody who's like trying to keep things for the most part like independent, right? Between the crime syndicates, the crime families, and then he knows that the empire is coming like, right now we're in this weird gray area. And it's like, well, they're both bad guys, but which bad guy is more beneficial for kind of the station that you're at, right? And he's got to choose a side. So I wonder if that's where he pops in. I think that could be a pretty solid option for him. Um, but I don't know. That one's weird. Creeping Fear, I think that might be like a very Devon centered one, right? It could come out right after like her master or the friend dies, right? Call to Oblivion, right? Like those two titles really scream to me like we're gonna go through some very emotional wreckage, and then that wreckage is where Maul thrives at, obviously. So he's gonna really push and pull little things, and we'll see obviously her do her own things, her own judgments. But I think this will be a very interesting place to have this very proto Ezra, right? Like maybe he goes a little too far, maybe he does succeed, but like she becomes too much. She becomes that talent as opposed to the apprentice, the Savage Opress, replacement, right? Like he has to have learned from that dynamic. I think that's gonna be really important for sure. But is it gonna be exactly what happens here in time for what we see eventually with Ezra? I don't know. I feel like that's an older man that's pulled back a little bit, is really trying to be a little bit more sympathetic as opposed to this version where he's like, yeah, I kinda hate it all. And when she says, like, you can't bring down the whole empire, this kinda feels like the time period where he's like, "This is exactly what I wanna do because it's at a crux point. This is where you push it wrong one way, it all falls apart." But maybe he pushes everything far one way, and that's what actually makes it fall apart. And again, very, very much in line with his character, and that could be something that really pushes him to more deeply work in the shadows as opposed to being a little bit more frontline, me being more like, do it myself sort of vibe, right? That's not something that I think he does for the majority of time of Crimson Dawn. At least that's not what I got the feeling of in his little cameo in Solo. But yeah, those are definitely the titles that really pop out to me. I mean, they're all kind of dark titles except for, the finale. So you can kind of choose which way you're gonna go. Overall, it does really indicate to me that they're not kidding, that this will be dark and streamlined and very much focused on just what's happening between the character back and forth and the plot, and there won't be any sort of filler to really pad out that. Like it will be entirely dependent on every single interaction. And I mean, that's good. Honestly, sometimes there is a little bit of fluff, right? Like we said with Bad Batch, there are things that it's like it's definitely kid oriented. There are things that are supposed to just pad it out and be episodic. This is not a show that's meant to be episodic. This is a show that's meant to be serialized. This is definitely going to be appealing to an older audience that has been watching since '08. All right. So if this is the way to do it, and then we can still have 14 to 16 episode seasons for other shows that can have those sort of arc based storytelling or have those filler episodes in between that you can let characters and supporting cast kind of grow out. I think they can both coexist. But for a story like this with Maul, where it seems like there's one guaranteed season and it's based on reception to what happens, that we might get a second and third. Yeah, I don't know. I think this could be a really good choice.
Yeah, definitely agree with all of those points. And I wanted to acknowledge Freezy, who sent in a super chat. Thank you so much, Freezy, for your super chat. We're going to finish up the Maul discussion here, and then we'll come right back to your super chat as the first question of the night. So let's turn to the chat on Maul specific questions, and then wrap up this topic, and then we'll get to the rest of your guys' questions. So we're going to start out with Critical Thinker, who said, Maul Shadow Lord trailer looks really good. I just hope the darker tone / horror adjacent elements aren't false advertising. Yeah, me too. I'm not expecting a true horror show. I mean, this is still an animated Star Wars show, whether it's Disney Plus or not. It's still the animated Star Wars show of the year. And I fully expect it to be friendly to at least an older child audience, at least somewhat Clone Wars-esque levels of violence, maybe slightly above Clone Wars-esque levels of violence, but there are moments like in Season 5 where Maul beheads Pre Vizsla, and it all but shows you him cutting his head off, right? There are things like that I fully expect to see. I mean, there was a shot in this trailer where he stabs a guy in the head. Like, I think we're going to see that type of violence, and they're going to get away with it because it's animation. But I don't think we're going to get like a real horror theme to it. Like, it might be a dark and sinister show. It might have this kind of overwhelming fear a part of the show, but I don't expect it to be like actually a scary show.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind a scary show, right? That's the thing. Like, this could be something that really harps on more of the side of Maul that is better explored, unfortunately, in Son of Dathomir when he is really more aligned with Talzin, more aligned with the Night Sisters and Night Brothers. And we are getting Night Brothers, but there is a part of me that's like, if you see a Night Brother, you rarely ever see a Night Brother without a Night Sister, unless you're Savage, right? Like that's kind of how it's been. And I know he does have the forces there of the Night Brothers in Son of Dathomir, but I am just very curious if like we are gonna see Night Sister, if we are gonna see him say like, all this planning for this galaxy was with the Sith, and it ends up being a bureaucratic machine of monsters and metal, right? What does that mean now for me and what I can build off of what I've already learned and the attempts I made with Ahsoka and all that? Can I go back to the lessons I've learned and the original root of his power and his and the source of why Palpatine wanted him in the first place? Does Dathomir hold a key for him at this point, post massacre and everything? Right, like there's so many elements there that I really want to see explored that would definitely make it a lot more horror themed and really would play with the visuals of that character, which are undeniable. But yeah, like you said, it's animation. It is aimed for younger audiences than even our TV PG live action TV shows are. I can't say like, oh, like that's such a shock. Like it's not, but I would hope that they could do something a little bit more horror themed, at least for some of the episodes, right? Like if this trailer is really harping on the Inquisitors, maybe make the Inquisitors for once feel deadly, right? Like I think this would be a really cool place where you do something super deadly, and then it's like, oh, like are they truly like leveled up here? And then Maul does something or Devin does something that's just so terrible, but it's a means to winning that you're like, oh yeah, like that it'll rip you back out of that horror vibe, back to reality, and a little bit more of the darker, depressing version of the story. That it does seem like it's playing for all ages while still, like you're saying, with the past visual and everything, still trying to work around age limitations.
Let's see. Next up, we have Coltrane, who says, what would you recommend a relatively new Star Wars fan read before watching or /watch before watching Maul Shadow Lord? I have several episodes of the Clone Wars on my short list, of course, including the Siege of Mandalore, along with Maul, Shadowhunter, and obviously the Phantom Menace. Anything else I should absolutely check out over the next month? Well, Phantom Menace would be, I think, the bare minimum. After that, I would say Clone Wars. I mean, I think unfortunately Maul is so tied to the events of the Clone Wars that it would kind of to jump into Siege of Mandalore would kind of ruin the rest of the Clone Wars for you, in my opinion, of just like the build up to that epic moment, that epic event. And the Clone Wars really stars its three original characters in that finale between Ahsoka, Rex, and Maul. So if you want to catch up, that's the fast way to do it, is to, watch all of his appearances in Clone Wars, starting from season 4 into season 5 and then season 7. I would say those are the essential stuff you would have to consume. But it's like, I have a hard time telling you have to watch any of that because obviously you already know he lives. You're watching Maul Shadow Lord, right? So it seems like this show is kind of designed to just pick up right into it. So you don't necessarily have to have seen everything. Because I wouldn't recommend just rushing through some of the best stuff in the Clone Wars and then getting to the rest later. Because I think that would just kind of ruin the Clone Wars for you. But if you only care about Maul, then I would say that's the way to go. Shadowhunter is a Legends novel, so know that it won't connect to this specific show. But it is my favorite Maul story in Legends. That's obviously not in film or TV. I think that's a really, really good show. You can also check out, or book, excuse me. You can also check out the miniseries in canon. Who wrote that? I think it was Bunn, if I remember right.
That
Cullen
does
Bunn.
sound familiar.
Uh, but that was actually surprisingly good. And it was a solid series about Maul trying to discover, or trying to quench his bloodlust to fight a Jedi. So it's a really cool series. It also takes place before Phantom Menace. If you're watching the Clone Wars, then another essential one is Son of Dathomir, which is basically his cut season 6 appearances summarized into a comic that actually is pretty awesome as well. So definitely check that out. I'm trying to think of other Legends things to recommend. Obviously, anything Legends won't fit into the actual story of Maul Shadowhunter. I know there is a Ron Mars comic miniseries that's pretty good. But yeah, I would say if you're looking for essentials, it's Phantom Menace and Clone Wars. Those are the ones that will tie most closely with this specific show, and then add in Son of Dathomir just for continuity purposes between Clone Wars Season 5 and Clone Wars Season 7.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty comprehensive. If you are, like Liam said, just trying to get to Shadow Lord, it's kind of hard to just give you a little bit more of Legends and canon because a lot of that, especially Legends, is it's more into Dark Times era, right? So that really does change how you could look at Maul. You could read it. I think in general, if you're asking about where and what Maul has been up to in Maul Shadow Lord, I think you have some sort of base understanding that Maul is revived. He's not just done in episode 1. So you could read like the Infinities comic with Maul. Like you could see some inspiration that really does play visually into his initial return, his initial serious look in Clone Wars. So that's a pretty cool thing to check out. Like Liam said, though, he is so intrinsically tied to like the back half of Clone Wars. He is kind of the guy who really jumpstarts us feeling like criminal organizations and not just, bounty hunters and, people engaged in crime in their own little groups. Like this is like them full on taking a war and making Clone Wars multiple wars, right? And one big thing about the Clone Wars is the wars that are led by and against the crime families and all, and how that shapes like, even TV shows like Mandalorian and everything, like, it really does stem from actions that Maul takes. So, without, like, giving any spoilers here, like, he he is pretty important to seasons 5 through 7 for sure. I think he does appear initially in season 4 or at the very ending. Um, but yeah, I would say a big thing though, as in general, especially for this show, is watch any episode that has Savage Opress in it, right? Because you're gonna get Maul in it too, but that dynamic is gonna be really crucial, I think, to what we're seeing between Devin and what we're seeing with Maul here in these two trailers. Because without it, I don't think you could skip straight to Siege of Mandalore, but it kind of defeats points of like why he's kind of looking for this almost partnership, like what he sees out of that partnership and what he will do differently in this partnership. Because, like I mentioned before, there are things that he does with Ezra and Rebels that are also very different. And now this is very interesting as a point to really check in on him and see, is he already making that leap toward where he is at the timeline of Rebels, or is he still very close to that Siege of Mandalore thinking with the Ahsoka and all that, right? So yeah, uh, definitely check it out. And for Son of Dathomir, like Liam said, it's action packed. It was an unfinished arc. Um, there's a lot of dark side magic and everything all there, and a lot of big names to check out. So if you just feel like, oh, it's just Maul, whatever, like no, it's crucial to the original conclusion of Maul in season 5, and essentially what we would have seen probably in a more serious fleshed out version of season 6 or season 7 prior to him reappearing in Siege of Mandalore.
Yeah, I completely concur with going back and watching the Savage stuff as well. I mean, really, to get the whole picture of Dathomir, also you could go back and watch the Ventress stuff into the Dathomir first appearances, which then leads into Savage. So like there is a whole build up, especially from season 3 on, but the first couple seasons have a little bit more Ventress that kind of builds into the Savage stuff. So watch the Clone Wars as a whole. But I would say, yeah, start with, I believe it's season 3 where Ventress turns to the Night Sisters. If you watch that stuff into Savage, into Maul, it just makes the arc far more rewarding across the board rather than just jumping into the Maul stuff and having no idea who Savage is, because Savage is so important to Maul and his story and kind of his connection, the redeeming qualities of Maul, that I think it is essential to understand that character as well. So definitely the Clone Wars would be the most, I would imagine, connective tissue to this, considering I believe they are starting the show right after the Clone Wars. So yeah, hopefully that helps you out, Coltrane. Next up, Critical Thinker says, I will say that I don't like that they've used established Inquisitors who can't die. It limits their options. If they see Maul and survive, why would the Empire not try to take him out? Well, we don't know if they don't try to take him out, right? I mean, he becomes one of the biggest criminal syndicate. His criminal syndicate becomes one of the biggest criminal syndicates in the galaxy, plus he establishes himself as a force to be reckoned with. They might try to take him out multiple times over, but maybe he just becomes so powerful they can't really get to him, or it will really upset the established kind of hierarchy of crime in the galaxy. And as we know, the Empire uses crime a lot to kind of keep a handle on all different elements of the galaxy that they can't necessarily handle on their own. So I would imagine the point of the show over the course of however many seasons it goes is to transform Maul into a crime lord. We know from the synopsis of the show that they're already kind of labeling him as a crime lord, but from the footage, it doesn't really look like he has much of a syndicate. It might just be him and his Night Brothers, committing crimes and pirating and stuff like that. I would imagine that whatever his conflict with the Empire is here, it takes him to the next level. As for using Inquisitors we know that can't die, I think one of the interesting things is Marok, because we know, he's basically an empty husk in Ahsoka. Is he always like that? Is this the show where he dies and then ends up being kind of resurrected later on by the Night Sisters? It'd be interesting to see how all that comes to a head. But I think in general, Maul's relationship with the Empire, which is not very clear by the time you get to Rebels, you just know he hates them. That's going to be also another big focus of the show, and we'll see what these specific Inquisitors have to do with that overall kind of a clash that we're going to see between Maul and the Empire, and maybe the Empire also has a big hand later on after Solo in dethroning Maul when he, ultimately gets stranded on Malachor. We assume it's because of a lost duel with the Empire.
Yeah, I mean that really does bring up the point. When does the Vader implied fight happen? Like he has a serious fear of Vader, right? It's not like he'd be like, "Oh, it's Anakin Skywalker. I'm afraid of him." It's not that. I think the only serious fear that he should have in terms of power would be Palpatine, and Palpatine's clearly not in Rebels in that form and function. So yeah, I mean, really building off Liam's points and really trying to harp on it, like the crime of it all, right? Star Wars has always had the underworld, right? There's always the good guy government, then the bad guy government, and then what connects it all? The grays of the underworld, where you can have characters like a Han Solo and Lando, and then you can have characters like a Kira, like a Maul, right? Like they come in so many shades, just like our heroes, just like our villains, but what makes them a lot more interesting and alive is that they can flip flop, they can push and pull, they can influence decisions that won't directly affect them, but might shape up the things between a bigger, larger conflict, right? So, who's to say that when you see a Marok, who's to say when you see the Crow Inquisitor, right, that we're not seeing them build out the versions of the history of the Inquisitors where they are seemingly a little bit more better off. They are losing to some of the big hitters, but they are still able to take down people like Devon's Master and all that. Still build up a small enough reputation, and then when they're faced with Devon and Maul, then we see a Marok death. Then we see the Crow Inquisitor, be severely damaged. Like these are, I'd argue, two of the most perfect Inquisitors to use here because, like Liam said, we don't really know other than the green smoke that implies it to be a Night Sister revival of sorts. And is it like a true Night Sister revival? Like we don't have any other Night Sisters in Ahsoka appear besides Morgan Elsbeth, and she's not quite Dathomiri. I think she is human. She's adopted too. So the magic that she has learned, is she in some ways not even fully refined yet, right? Before she meets the Great Mothers. And then we don't really get a chance to see her use all her powers because they're like, here's the sword of Talzin, slightly different, figure it out, use it, and make a big, you know, samurai-esque fight between her and Maul. But if we had a chance to see a little bit more of her stretching her powers out, then I think that would have almost implied that she did become the one to revive Marok, but it wasn't as powerful as it could have been. It was imperfect. There was limitations. Like he wasn't alive. He was almost like an extended avatar for her to use. Like, and I think that'd be a very interesting way of looking at it. Like, she's kind of got a persona that's semi-active. She's programmed some inputs, but if she was more directly in charge, if she's more or able to give more life to it, maybe we would have seen a much more interesting fight. And the Crow, similarly too, we see everything about him deflate the moment Ahsoka kills him. Right? Is he killed here? Is he revived in some other means, or is this something about a species? We have no context for these guys about like what life means for them, right? We see other inquisitors, and when they die, or they have a second chance, and then they die, right? These two inquisitors, the verdict's still out, and I think it makes quite a lot of sense. And as far as how Maul kind of fits in the picture, like, yeah, you're saying, oh, why wouldn't they just hunt down Maul right away? Like Liam said, you want to have the crime work out in your favor, right? Like it's just how like the Bacon Clan and everything was slowly pulled as strings throughout the Clone Wars before everything with Rush comes to a head in season 5, and then Palpatine's like, "Oh, well, I guess we have to take over the banks." Like as if that wasn't an orchestrated move by pitting together Padme and Rush and Anakin and all that, right? So it's a slow moving thing. I assume that we're gonna see things be slow moving about using Maul still. If he's gonna be alive, if he's gonna be a nuisance and continue to escape, might as well keep him there. Might as well limit his ceiling, but allow him to think that he's breaking through, think that he's doing this and that, and, maybe he does challenge at certain points, but not enough to really get Maul in trouble per se, or to have that sort of Palpatine fight happen to him. Or, maybe this is a chance where Vader comes in, Vader's knocks him down, and he's like, you know what, I'm the enforcer only right now, and I've been told to leave you alive because you're more useful to us alive than dead. Right? There's so many ways to look at that. Continue to build out these skirmishes between Inquisitors where he's getting the better of them, continue to build out the crime empire. And then maybe at some point, Maul is smart enough to be like, I built out the syndicates, I built out a family, I built out Crimson Dawn. Now I can just work in the shadows and really focus on the things I want to do and not be such a front man because he's always been the front man. He's always been the dog on the leash and he doesn't know any better. But the only way to really beat these top guys is to have strategy, to be working from the shadows, to be someone that, strikes out of nowhere. And I think that's really huge. I think that's something that needs to transform about his character before, we do eventually see him on Malachor kind of forced back into his old ways, but at a much more advanced age.
Next up, Vertigo says it was a great trailer. I agree. I really loved the trailer. Critical Thinker says Shadow of Maul first issue is pretty decent, which is more than I can say for all the other Star Wars comics this past year. I'll have to check it out. I'm very interested in this, especially because when they announced the comic, I don't think we had seen really anything from Shadow Lord yet, and it didn't sound that interesting. But now seeing the trailers and seeing the dynamic, I'm far more interested in the character it's about. Critical Thinker also says animation is definitely the most consistent aspect of modern Star Wars era. Shadow Lord is pretty much the only thing coming out I'm excited for. It is easily the most consistent part of the Disney Plus Star Wars era. I would say the entire run of Disney Star Wars animation has been by far the best thing. Like you said, Resistance is the only stinker, and Tales of the Empire, while not nearly as good as I had hoped, I don't know if I'd say it's like outright horrible. It's not good, but it's not like as bad as some of the things they've made in live action TV or live action films sometimes. So it is still, I would say, even more of a win than some of the other stuff they've made. Critical Thinker also says my pipe dream for them is to pull some basic ideas and background from Legacy Talon, who, to be fair, isn't really fleshed out, but you could still have aspects inspired from the portrayal. Legacy Talon is pretty one note, so I want them to branch out and do more interesting stuff, but I would prefer to see her evolve into a fully devoted Darksider, just following Maul's legacy and instructions rather than Krait's. Yeah, I think that's the way they're going to go. And I know Freezy right after asks if we think they might introduce Talon in future post-sequel projects. I think it's a strong possibility. I mean, one of the things we've seen now, if your super chat comes to a head and Freezy, and I do have a whole video I'm planning on posting this week about that specific topic, but if that idea comes to a head, it seems like they're going about the post-sequel trilogy as like a way to bring in as many elements of interest, I would say, into the story and try to add things that will get fans excited, because I think they know they have an uphill battle when it comes to post-sequels. They know they have an uphill battle bringing in sequel characters. They know they have an uphill battle introducing yet another new set of characters to the fans, right? Now is your time to try things. And I think even if it's just for one movie and they kill her off, if they were able to connect the animation and the film with Talon, I think that would be a really interesting move, especially with the very well-known fact that she was going to be one of the villains of George Lucas's original sequels, with the fact that she is well known across the Star Wars fandom for reasons that are pretty obvious, but not necessarily story reasons. I think you can bring all of those elements together to create a far more interesting character than we see in Legends, but also keep some of those essential things about her in Legacy and tie them into a character that's far more layered, far more interesting, and also still maintains that quality from Legends that everybody does like. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, if Devin is indeed Talon, which I think she is, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in store for us in the future.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, critical thinker, like, and what Freezy was also saying, like, yeah, this could be a well-rounded version of Talon, and that's always been the issue I've been harping about Talon. I'm not the biggest fan of her in Legacy. I think there's a little bit of Legacy that feels like it just coasts on being a remix at times as opposed to really trying to push something new. And you can make the same argument about the sequels, but I still think the sequels, at least now, ironically, what they're set up like timeline wise and politically, has a chance to grow out in the post sequel era. But Legacy, unfortunately, we saw got cut out, and characters that were there in that first run that I think could have really been explored and expanded past the original crew just didn't really have a chance to show up more than once or twice in Legacy Volume 2. But Talon is one that I was like, oh man, like when she's out, she's out. It's like, that's it. Like we're just feeding in like 2000 nerd fanboys like sensuality, right? That's all her character is. It's fine for the seduction of Cade and like, playing and how he's kind of playing both sides at that point. That's fine. She's got very acrobatic fighting, but I enjoy characters like Ayla Secura more, even if she does have some things in her comics that are like a little off and weird putting off putting to me. But once we got to Hera, I was like, yes, this is what I want to see from Twilight, where you can still play into those elements, play into the history of like the slavery on Ryloth and all that, but you're still giving variety to these characters. And Talon can be a variety, but she has to have her own role in the story. She can't just be a hand of Crate and then that's it, right? Like if we get to that point where we have a Crate show up and she is one of the hands, I'd love to have known all these other incredible things about her and why then becomes the big thing for me. Like, why are you choosing to be a hand if you've been trained by Maul, if you've witnessed so much of your own pain and destruction and success and failure over the years, right? Like that is something I'd love to see. But to get to that point, you have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations and be well rounded. So I want to see what this show introduces originally, while and then takes elements from the comics, her look and design, maybe make something a little bit more appropriate for her and actually play into the name of Talon, right? That's one thing that I never truly got. There's always kind of characters that I feel like have a very distinct, striking name, and then they don't do anything with it. Like Nihilus, that's a great name for that type of character because he's devouring the worlds and all that, right? Scion, like the pain, like there's a lot of Old Republic, especially, I think really nails the names of what these characters are. Even someone like a Cadus, I'm like, I don't love it, but I understand the reasoning of it. When we get to town, I'm like, is there really anything other than, like, the bone lightsabers that they're using? I don't think I even recall, like, a panel of her, like, baring her fangs or anything, right? So I'd love to see meaning to that name be brought via the show. And then I'd love to see what George Lucas had in mind for this character because no matter what, he was only keeping the aesthetic of the character. I don't think he had really any intentions of honoring who the character was, especially if he's going to pair somebody 150 years past Return of the Jedi with a clone version of Maul, who may or may not have been a clone, and then putting them into his sequel timeline. And then what does that mean for that character? What is their dynamic like? What is something that has she survived all this time? What her origins? I'd love to have seen elements of that we don't know as fans or we don't know through leaks and all that actually start to show up here. And then when we get BTS, when we get like little news articles, they reference, oh, we pulled it from the comics here. Oh, this is original. Oh, this is actually one of George's idea. And we just felt like it all kind of lined up neatly. I'd love to see that for her. And then if she does continue past this show and continue past the Dark Times time period, then at least I'll feel a lot more confident about what a Talon character can do. But right now, if we're going just Talon from the comics, I would be disappointed.
Next up, I believe it was Freezy who said, would love to even see an undead resurrected Maul in Ahsoka Season 2. Maybe that's why Thrawn is headed to Dathomir. That's a cool idea. I've never even thought about that. As for seeing it, like, I think it would be very cool. I don't know if I necessarily want it for story reasons, just because I really love Maul's death. I think Maul's death is so well done. And I don't know if I want to see him back, but if Talon were maybe involved and it was used in some type of way that added some level of challenge or even like spiritual, mental challenge for her, a hurdle for her, if say she was in Ahsoka Season 2 or say she was in some future Star Wars content where Maul was brought back with Night Sister magic. I think it could be a cool, appearance, visual a cool thing for fans, a cool Easter egg. Like it could be really awesome, but I don't necessarily want to see the character come back because I just think they did such a great job with his final year and a half of time in Star Wars by the time he goes out. So I don't want to see him necessarily brought back to life, but it would be cool nonetheless to see more characters. Like even a Savage maybe could be another answer to bring back to life. We also don't know where Maul is buried. I assume it's Tatooine. Wouldn't be on Dathomir unless somebody went and found him, because he's alone with Obi-Wan when he dies. So I don't know where he's buried or where his remains are. But regardless, it would be interesting to see what types of characters or which types of creatures or horror elements can be brought to Ahsoka Season 2 through the Night Sister magic, through Dathomir itself as a location. And I really do hope we see Dathomir consistently in Season 2, and it's not just Thrawn's fleet is orbiting Dathomir. Like, I actually want to go onto the planet and see all of the stuff that makes Dathomir such an amazing location and one of my favorite locations in Star Wars. So hopefully we do get all of that.
I also was gonna bring up Savage. I mean, technically he dies on Mandalore, right? So it's like, where exactly are we gonna have a retrieval squad happen? But then again, Night Sisters, Night Brothers are there. The Mandalorians probably could have done something to clear up the scene, right? I could see him happening, but then the problem is, who knows Savage for Ahsoka season 2? It would maybe be Ahsoka. He's not really like a force for anybody else than Asajj and I guess you could say Obi-Wan, right? Like he's not really a character that I could like he'd be cool to see, but I feel like he would run into the same issue of like a Cad Bane and Book of Boba Fett, right? You're not he would probably be like only showing up in like an episode or two. And if he's undead, it'll be maybe a little hard to identify him as well. And we do know the magic of him is what creates his body and the armor. He's not quite as naturally gifted and in the force and even his physique in some ways to Maul, right? So I'm not 100% sure on Savage. I think it would work, but it just I'm not really sure which characters would be like, oh, okay, that's Savage Press. Like, I think we'd run into the Cad Bane situation of like, you've seen everything, you're happy with that, but then wondering why didn't you see him earlier, right? Like, those elements would have been great, and to see Book of Boba Fett to like set up the stage of like there is a presence lurking that nobody is aware of until it all comes to a head, instead of just here he is in the last two episodes. And then you can't really do that if the character's undead, right? What is he gonna do? Just be bouncing around from a fleshy bag and then see his like limbs be orchestrated, right? And I don't think you'd be able to use the force too with the character. That's gonna be a huge thing as well. Anytime we see Marin in Fallen Order like resurrect some of the Night Sisters, they're not really using the force. They're just zombies. They're just jumping at you, they're grabbing at you. And I think that takes away from both of the characters possible here of Savage and Maul. If we do manage a way to do it with Maul, the only character that would be really good for would be Ezra, and I do believe he's supposed to be on Dathomir, like leading some of the charges there, and not just in space and all. So that could work. But again, like Liam said, I really like the ending. I'd rather us just see the ending in live action at some point, just to be reinforcing that idea because it was thematically so sound back to the original root of when everyone's life changed when Qui-Gon died, right? It wasn't just Maul, but yeah. And I know what you're saying, Marok was some kind of resurrection in Ahsoka. See, that's the thing we're not 100% sure on. Like, is it even really Marok, right? Like, Marok could be a whole different alien species or a human or something. We have nothing about Marok as like a resurrection. I'd argue it's just a bunch of gas that's being manipulated. It's just a little bit of the magic at play here that we see, like in the same way as Savage's armor, same way that we see in a hand small when he's first revived everything Clone Wars. But as is there like a body there? No, there really isn't. That's the thing. If we had seen some sort of face or body or anything, and that was the big thing. Who is Marok? Is Marok someone that we know about that we just haven't seen until now? Like people, I remember the earliest versions of Marok discussions were like, is this like Barris showing up finally? Would that make sense for Ahsoka? But then it's like, ah, no, it seems like a dude or something, right? Either way, we don't see any sort of physical body. The whole thing collapses in on itself, right? It's literally ripped out of the armor. So I wouldn't call that a resurrection. I would call that just a backup, right? Like some sort of like it's like a ghost when you play old racing games. There's like a ghost that plays on the same level. That's kind of how Marok feels like to me. It's like they've taken everything about the fighting, about the skills, and that's it. There's not Marok themselves there, right? So that's where I make the distinction. But maybe Liam has a different perspective.
No, I think I feel fairly similarly. It feels a little bit more like though that Marok's soul or something was transported into this husk, and that by, like you said, kind of like a ghost, but almost like his spirit. And we do see that kind of thing, whether it be Talzin's spirit, who's in the Clone Wars, um, other characters like that, just in visuals that we've seen through Night Sister magic, like the soul, the spirit of these characters kind of pulled out of them. Um, to me, it feels more like that with Marok. It feels more like maybe he was dying and they took his spirit out and put it in this armor and this vessel, and he just became this like kind of eternal vessel that when it's destroyed, his spirit goes away, which is kind of a recurring thing we have seen a lot in sci-fi fantasy, almost in a way similar to like the Witch King of Angmar or some of the wraiths in Lord of the Rings, something like that. That's kind of the vibe I got from Marok, more so than he's like a resurrected, because in the actual resurrected stormtroopers we see are just zombies, right? So and then similarly also when we see the Night Sisters resurrected in the Clone Wars for that battle, they're also zombies. So it's kind of, we've seen different variations of Night Sister magic. Maybe it's just about who cast the spell. Maybe a more powerful Night Sister like a Talzin or one of the Great Mothers could cast a spell that's more powerful to bring back somebody more fully if it's just cast on one person. I think all that remains to be seen. I don't think there's a definitive answer in the lore. But when it comes to Maul specifically, I think it would be really cool, Freezy. Like, I think it's a cool idea, and I would love to see some of the other characters who die on Dathomir come back. But the only reason I hesitate, it's like the same reason I hesitate for Asajj coming back. Like, a lot of people just want to see their characters, and that's fine. That's a good, as good of a reason as any. I just, for me, having read and having seen all these things, right, I just always like to sit with real character moments and not let them fly by just to have another appearance of the character, right? But to each their own. If they were to bring Maul back and they could do it in a cool way, my mind could definitely be changed. Freezy says the world between worlds is a pathway many would consider to be unnatural. Can you imagine Luke Skywalker and Maul going at it? Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting visual, and it still is something that could happen in like a cave or something, like a dark side Vergence. I would rather see it there than see the actual character, right? Like, I think the world between worlds is a concept that so many people really kind of simplify to the point where it's become just Star Wars time travel to a lot of people, and it isn't necessarily Star Wars time travel the way it works. When you watch the episodes, it's very much so like a specific thing for that moment in Star Wars, and it's very much so reiterated that it's not something that can really be used or be used lightly. It's something that was specifically used to help Ezra learn a lesson, and in learning that lesson, yes, he saves Ahsoka, which it's not really clear if when she goes back in time, if it's the future or the past. It could still be season 2 Rebels, because we do see her shadow, her silhouette at the end of season 2, right? So it's not really clarified whether it is actually time travel, but it does show whoever is using it pivotal moments in their life where they can have the ability to make decisions that can shape them and shape the future. But of course, there's always a consequence, as is reiterated in that moment. So it can't, in my mind, just be used to create time travel and multiverse scenarios all over Star Wars for us to have fun. I mean, they could make early 2000s Star Wars would have made a video game where we could all fight everybody via the world between worlds. But I don't really see that happening necessarily in today's Star Wars. But yeah, it would be cool. It would be a cool visual to have Luke go up against some of these old Sith, but I would prefer it in some type of like dark side vergence sort of scenario.
Yeah, I'd prefer something like that too, right? Like we see Yoda's sort of confrontation with Darth Bane, right? You can have some sort of spirit trapped in the tomb. You go to Moraband, as it's called, canon instead of Korriban, right? Like you can do stuff like that. I I feel like we've gone so far away from just the fact that like that used to be like the hub of where all these possibilities could really happen. You can even have the Valley of the Jedi, right? From Kyle Katarn stories where Darth Bane's like mind bomb, thought bomb really goes off and wipes out Sith and Jedi alike, right? Like there's so many ways for the Force to like create interactions that doesn't have to be the world between worlds only, right? It's the one that is the most known now because of its connections to the biggest animation to being reintroduced in Ahsoka. Like I understand the appeal of it, but like Liam said, it's not a time travel machine. It's kind of like a thing that pops up and does its own thing as it wants, and when it makes sense, it's brought up only for the plot, 100%. But there are characters that have things that tie them to it, right? If it is in some ways tied to the Celestials, like the Mortis gods, right? Then there is the question of like, well, why does Ahsoka matter? Well, because we see Morai all the time. She has the daughter's spirit embedded in her, and in some way, she is the daughter from Mortis, right? So those are things that bring those characters in. Then you bring up the questions of like, well, why is Ezra here, right? Well, Ezra's there and he wants to change his future or the future of Canaan, but it's a closed loop there. It's like they show you an opportunity, you could do it, but you'll kill yourself, right? Like it's there's that interesting facet there too when it's introduced. But then when he actually does get to manipulate it, right? It's the only character that has like kind of this sort of like get out of jail card when it comes to World Between Worlds, Ahsoka again, right? So it feels like maybe certain characters might have certain force anomalies, force vergences that could be of use for them. But for the others, not so much. That's kind of how I look at it. And then if you bring up Anakin, well, Anakin in some ways is kind of taking the role of the father, it seems like that was kind of the whole point of the Mortis arc. Like, I need you to take over to balance out my son and daughter. And he's like, no, like, I'm not trying to do this. I got places to be and all that. But like we had talked about in previous streams, this would be a really interesting place to continue Anakin's journey to the Force and also explain why like he can't communicate with his grandson, right? In Ben Solo, right? We see in I'm blanking on the name, Shadow of the Sith, right? Like when Luke is using the Tython Seeing Stone that Grogu uses in Mandalorian, that he's like attacked by all these wraiths and all that. It's like, oh my god, like I'm on Exegol, things are going crazy. Is he actually transported there? Is it like some plane in between? Like who knows, right? But Anakin shows up and he gives him some words of advice, but then he's in literal pain and he's like in shock, like oh, like he can't do it. And how does that line up with what we're seeing, where he's almost seemingly the father and almost a celestial like being? Like there is so much to what we don't know about Mortis yet, so much to what we don't know about the world between worlds yet. But as a whole, I do think it is kind of, for the most part, going to only be useful for certain characters who have some connection to the Mortis gods, who have a role to play with specifically that force anomaly of sorts, right? Uh, I would rather not have this, like Liam said, become turned into like an early 2000s, like this is just Terrasi Kasi 2, and you can have people fight around here because of it. It's like, eh, don't do that. It is one of the worst explained things I would say. But I do want it to be something that we get a little bit more of a clear, definitive understanding of why it functions the way it does in Ahsoka season 2, and then kind of just throwing it into a show like this or to new characters that would kind of bum me out. But yeah, we'll see how that happens. But not really my cup of tea. Use something else, man.
Well, I think we should get to the beginning of the chat now. We've talked a lot about Maul, and we'll incorporate the rest of the Maul chats, obviously, into it. But just to be fair to the people who sent in their chats earlier and all the other questions we're getting, appreciate you, Thomas, for joining the Patreon YouTube membership programs. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining. Again, if anybody wants to check out the tiers and see which one's right for you, there are links in the description. So appreciate that, Thomas. Let's get to that super chat from Freezy as well, who says, will we get Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker's son in Starfighter? This has been a hot topic, and I mean, we've talked about it a little bit on these streams already. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, as I have had for years on Mara Jade coming into canon and just the introduction of that character in this specific scenario. Like I said earlier, I am working on a video that's kind of my take on this specific thing and how it could and could not make sense overall. And specific scenes I think you could use to just kind of create that hype wave. I mean, obviously, all of it depends on they make good movies and people like them, and it doesn't flop, right? But I think it's a very viable thing. So first off, without completely spoiling my video, so that people have a chance to kind of see it in the way I want to present it, because it's close to being done. You should see it by Friday. I think there's a way to kind of open this film, Starfighter, that is, with this character, right? This character of what's the kid's name who's playing him? I already forgot it. I believe it's Flynn Gray. You start the film maybe with Flynn Gray, his perspective. I think one of the things you could do that would be kind of cool is if you started the film from his perspective, the way you kind of see him and possibly Amy Adams running from a larger threat. You could kind of track their appearances via the entire sequel trilogy and show where they came from and how they grew through the sequel trilogy into ultimately when they meet Ryan Gosling. I think you can do it a couple different ways where you can string it along, whether you reveal it right off the bat. I think in one scenario, if Mara was Amy Adams, you could start the film out with Kylo Ren's destruction of Luke's temple, and in doing so, show that from Mara's perspective. Show what happened and why it's happening. Flynn, I believe, is rumored to be playing around a 10 to 12-year-old kid. That would kind of work perfectly with the timeline they've set up if he was born or about to be born at the point of when Kylo destroys Luke's temple. Which actually Kylo doesn't destroy Luke's temple. We still don't know who destroyed Luke's temple, but Kylo was there and was part of it and kind of blamed for that because a bomb goes off and he doesn't exactly get to see it. So over time, over the film and over the course of this series, I think there are a lot of cool ways where you could slowly reveal maybe an overall plot by Luke to protect this kid, to protect Mara, and in doing so, maybe redeem some elements about Luke people don't like by making him on Octu for a specific reason rather than just because he's sad that the Jedi were defeated and he's going into hiding because he doesn't want to be, causing any more issues in the galaxy. There are other reasons you could have him go into hiding that maybe have to do with a child and with his wife. So I think there are some I think there are some cool added elements to where if you were to put Mara in hiding with their child, you could actually reframe Luke's story in the sequels. And still, even when he does sacrifice himself, it's a little bit more multi-layered rather than just for Rey, just for Leia, just for the Resistance. He's kind of bringing a spark back into the galaxy to bring that light to his own family who might be in hiding as well. So I'll have the whole details in the video, but yeah, it's something I've really thought about, and I think it could work. Would it feel like they're trying to desperately, kind of retcon things that they've set up in the sequels? Of course, yeah, it would feel like that. I do think the Skywalker saga, the post Skywalker saga, would be better for having a Skywalker, especially one that you could start with and Harry Potter it, right? Grow up with Flynn Gray. Let him be in 15 Star Wars projects and just slowly grow up with this kid, which in my head is kind of one of the only ways I feel like you can find a new cast of characters that we could actually fall in love with. Maybe not on the same level as those original 6 movie characters, but in a way, at least we would grow with them and see them evolve and see them change and grow into this legacy, rather than just dumping new people in and being like, these are your new characters. They have nothing to do with what came before. They're just part of the galaxy now. I think it's a way you could do it, but it doesn't bring the spirit of what Star Wars is, which is the family drama, right? I think the family drama aspects of Star Wars have always been there. If you ignore that, it's hard to get invested. It will be a hard sell no matter what with new characters. And so if they find a way to kind of tie it to the old events and trying to recontextualize a lot of the other things we've seen, I do think there is a chance of success in that strategy. And if it doesn't work, you ignore it, you move on, and you do the Damon Lindelof thing, the legacy thing of jump way into the future and just kind of ignore everything that happens, try again later in the future, right? But I think right now what they're going to do is really try to make you fall in love with a Jason, Jaina, Anakin style younger set of possible Skywalkers and watch them grow, sheltered by the legacy of Rey, maybe sheltered by the legacy of Ben, through the legacy of their parents, their ancestors, into ultimately by the time they reach of age, they are compelling enough leads that you're actually interested in them as people rather than them as Skywalkers or legacy members of the original 9 movies. So I think that's an interesting way to do it, and it's something I think very well could happen.
I've been pretty clear. I want Mara back. I don't know if I necessarily want the tie-in. I do like the idea of Ben being the last, and I know Dan the Man, you're like, well, throw in Kyla's unmentioned twin siblings. I think if we had Luke and Han have two of their kids and not mention it during the sequel trilogy, that'd be pretty hard to pull off, unless they somehow die in like the first years of like the New Republic. But to your point about like Luke being aware of the Emperor being back, it makes sense that he had his son and wife from him. I don't know if it's necessarily the Emperor. Like, it could just be like Snoke, right? Snoke is being controlled by the Emperor. There are things about the darkness in him that maybe Luke sees that he's like, this is unnatural in a way that I haven't felt from Vader, from Palpatine, from the acolytes of the Beyond, like all these characters that I interacted with that have had the dark side. Like there's like something else almost guy controlling it, or maybe that's what makes him scared, right? I don't want us to just suddenly like ignore Snoke and whatever happens with Luke post New Republic era or post Episode 6. That feels central to whatever the story is being told here. You can obviously show proto Emperor clones and stuff like that, and play and hear his voice more. I'd love to see stuff like that, but to your point, Dan the Man, if we're gonna have the 2 twins, I guess the question is, if we're gonna have a set of twins, does that mean Ben's Solo, Anakin Solo, but older, right? Like, I think the fun thing about Anakin is that he is younger. I know there's the whole thing of Anakin being introduced in Dark Empire and then the twins being introduced in Thrawn trilogy, so it's like almost a mishmash of two kind of viewpoints of the Star Wars future between Veitch and Zahn, but they made it work by really harnessing the fact that he is younger. He does look up to his siblings, but he does his things his own way, and he has a lot of comparisons to his grandfather, right? So I think the grandfather stuff can work. I'm very curious how you'd make the twin stuff work, especially with them being the older dynamic intentionally in EU, right? So that's what I would say there. As far as the whole thing of Amy Adams being Mara Jade, I wouldn't hate it. I don't recall many like action packed roles for her, and I would think it'd be a bit of a shame if she's just handing off this kid and we don't get to see her like go down in one final flame, right? Like I think there's got to be at least something action packed if you're gonna make her Mara Jade. If she's just like for safekeeping giving the kid to Ryan Gosling, I think that loses a little bit of appeal for me. I'd like to have seen something really cool with an actress with that stature, right? That recognition. If you're gonna really make her tie it in to Luke, great. But let's see some flashbacks. Let's see some things that really flesh her, and then want us to get an animated show. Want us to get a younger recast that we get to see in some TV shows or something, right? If we are selling that she is Mara Jade, we got to see like the whole embodiment of like the Mara that people classically fell in love with Bantam era Mara. And I don't know how much of that you can really show without it feeling like, well, this is so many years past that, and how are we gonna are we gonna adapt elements of her character that we see in Legacy of the Force in New Jedi Order? I just don't know if this is a gonna if this is a story about the handover of like to protect the kid I'm giving to Gosling. How much time do we have? Right? That's what I'm saying. And yeah, and I'm not saying that would be impossible, right? It'd be cool if Grisks or something like that'll happen there. I just hope that Luke, Leia, and Han are like, oh yeah, by the way, we've already got another set of kids here that they're more important there as opposed to the reborn emperor kind of coming into the picture, right? So that's just how I look at it. But I like your ideas, man. I like how you're throwing them out. Um, to address some of what Critical Thinker is saying, I I just this idea that we can't use original trilogy characters to influence the sequel trilogy, it feels a little dumb to me. Like you might not personally like it, I get that, but we have prequel trilogy characters, even though they did it in reverse, that are influencing the narrative of the original trilogy. If frankly, it's very fascinating to see the prequel trilogy and the versions of those characters and what we see in the original trilogy. We've got a much older, broken down Obi-Wan. We've got a near death Yoda. We've got half man, half machine Vader, Palpatine, who's not really tied into the bureaucracy of things anymore, kind of pushes and pulls only on Vader and things that he wants to do. And they're all trying to tell this kid, strike down your father, kill him, either become the light side who does that or the dark side, right? If you were to show that, and I have shown friends the original trilogy after seeing the prequels, they're like, why are they like so like twisted and messed up? Like, why are they sending a kid out without any information to hunt down and kill his father? It's like, oh, he should have been properly trained. Yes, that's an argument for sure. But yeah, I don't know. And your argument about the everything's supposed to be a happy ending where they keep on fighting, that's not what the EU is, right? Like eventually a lot of these characters do die off. It's just for some reason the original trilogy is spared, and then there's suddenly like 70 in Crucible, and you're like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, are you guys still fighting? Are you guys still doing the jig? What about happened to the younger generations and all that? So I think I'm seeing what you're saying about them being meant to fail, and that like, oh, the original trilogy characters were meant to ride off in the sunset. Technically speaking, the original draft of Return of the Jedi had Luke walk off in the sunset by himself. It wasn't a very happy ending for the character. A lot of Return of the Jedi is, I don't want to say contrived, but it was made a little bit more mass appeal friendly past the original intentions of George when he was still kind of thinking about 7 through 9 and doing those next as opposed to the prequels. If you look at his 70s and 80s interviews, right? And yeah, they stay around and don't give up, I guess. But what is a Luke gonna do at 80 years old, right? We don't know how these characters die. what would have been so incredible of a death with how much power scaling and everything comes into play here that would have been such a worthy death to me. That's the thing. I'm not saying you have to love the sequel trilogy characters' deaths, but they're in service of the future. The future is literally killed off by the time we see these characters in episode, not episode, in Legacy of Force and Fate of the Jedi. It's really just Ben Skywalker and whatever Jaina is doing with the Fel Empire at that point.
Yeah, I think I feel very differently from you, critical thinker, about like don't mix the eras. To me, the only reason I would feel that way is if they jumped into the future. If we're Since they decided we're gonna do a couple years, I believe, after the Rise of Skywalker as our first post Rise of Skywalker movie. Originally, when they announced Rey's New Jedi Order movie, if that would have been the first one, it was 15 years later, right? So it's a little easier to say, well, let's just move those movies into the past. But deciding to do it now, I believe 1 year later was what they said. If they do it 1 year later, they have to acknowledge those movies. I mean, you have to, and that seems to be the purpose of why you would do only a couple years later, is to tie it in as closely as possible with 7, 8, 9, with the Skywalker saga. And in my head, the only reason to do that is if you took a calculated risk of saying, hey, we know people are upset there's no Skywalker now in the Skywalker saga. We know that Rey, while she has her fan base, is overall kind of the symbol of the mixed feelings people have about the sequels. Let's introduce a new character who is maybe a Skywalker, who is the Skywalker by birthright if he's Luke's son. And in doing so, redeem and try to tie in the rest of those sequel elements people hate, bring them back in a way that possibly helps build the next generation. So they're no longer the focus, but they are a key piece of the future. It's kind of in that way. I mean, we use the original trilogy, prequel trilogy to original trilogy example all the time, right? Of Obi-Wan is one of the main characters in the prequels, but he's barely in the original trilogy. He plays a significant role in helping get the new heroes off the ground, and then fades into kind of the advice-giving realm. I see a similar trajectory for Rey, except I think in a way she is obviously going to be a lot more active than Obi-Wan was because he's really old in those movies. She'll be a lot more active, but in a way it's going to be the guide. It's going to be somebody who actually knew this kid's father, because this kid, depending on his age, probably won't have known Luke. And if he did, he was going to be very, very small when he met Luke. And so a lot of the legacy of Luke, and hopefully maybe even some Force Ghost appearances of Luke, could guide this kid into becoming the chosen one. Similarly, I'm using that as like a mythological term, not necessarily a Star Wars term, right? Obviously not going to be the chosen one in Star Wars, but like becoming a hero the way Luke did, right? The way he was this kid who didn't know what to do and grew into this hero because of the people around him, because of the people guiding him. I think that's going to be the way they are able to do something with these types of characters. And so that's why I personally feel like you have to connect the movies, because if you don't connect the movies, it feels like an even like bigger retcon to tell stories in this time and then just be like, yeah, and obviously Rey, Finn, and Poe exist, and obviously the events of the Rise of Skywalker and Force Awakens, Last Jedi exist, but we're not even going to talk about them. You have to acknowledge them if you're going to set a movie in this time period. So if they did the Damon Lindelof thing and set it 50 years after the Rise of Skywalker and had old lady Rey, in the movie, but it was about a next generation, don't necessarily need to acknowledge it. But when you do it a couple years after, you have to acknowledge it. And that's how I personally feel. I think when it comes to this kid's journey, I mean, you guys are the real ones, so I'll share a lot of my ideas, and hopefully you still watch the video. But I think when it comes to Ben Solo versus Luke's child, right? What are the main differences? Well, honestly, if you look at the Legends timeline, it would line up almost perfectly with when Luke had a child in Legends. If he has a child right before Ben destroys the temple, before the temple is destroyed. So, like Breezy said, and it was similar to the way I was thinking, if Luke is somehow able to uncover a larger plot from the Emperor, from Snoke, from all these different forces, and is kind of afraid of the way they were able to so easily manipulate his nephew, I think him going into hiding makes a lot more sense for protecting his own child from also falling prey to that same manipulation. If he thinks, similar to how Obi-Wan and Yoda did, well, Kylo Ren's the new Vader, if he takes control of the galaxy, if he's one of the people that creates this monstrous force, right? What's my hope of stopping him? Well, maybe it's my own son, and not just my own son, protecting my own son from becoming him also. I think that's a big piece of this story if you were to introduce Luke's son. I think on top of that too, we don't know exactly when Luke went into hiding, right? It could have been right before The Force Awakens. It could have been a year before The Force Awakens. It could have been 2 years before The Force Awakens. But regardless, I believe there are 6 years between The Rise of Kylo Ren and The Force Awakens. So there's a whole lot of time where Luke could have figured out some other things that led to this larger plot that ultimately led him to Ahch-To. And it could have been some type of avalanche effect to where he doesn't just leave immediately. He actually is, it's the amalgamation of reasons and the discoveries of the dark side and all these things that he does now with no Jedi Order. He has to maybe retreat and conserve his own strength, conserve his family's strength until ultimately he can come back with his child, with his family, and redeem the galaxy. But I think one of the things about Luke, though, is he's not somebody who can sit idly by while these things happen. And so maybe he puts up a front and pretends to be this curmudgeonly old man with Rey. But when all is said and done, he's still Luke Skywalker, and he still comes out of hiding and saves everybody because he's still Luke Skywalker. And he's not going to let everybody die, even if it is between him protecting his own family versus protecting the galaxy. Maybe things just have gotten too bad to the point where he can't ignore his role as the savior. I think there are a lot of different things you can do. Obviously, I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of other ideas and things written down, but I do think it is a viable option for them that they can slowly explain things over time, slowly come up with different ideas. But the number one thing I want to see is the fall of Luke's temple, and I do want to see some type of epic duel for Luke in that. Like, I want to see him maybe saving his family by having this epic duel with whoever destroys the temple. It could be Snoke, it could be Palpatine, it could be another dark side character who's maybe in these movies. It could be all sorts of different things. But I want to see Luke have an epic duel, and I want to see him come out on top, and I want to see that, because that is one of the sins of the prequels that I'll never, understand why we didn't get, is seeing Master Luke, actually have a lightsaber duel. I wanted to see that. So I would love to see that at some point. But yeah, you guys all have a lot of ideas about this, obviously. I mean, it's a topic that means a lot to all of us, seeing Luke at his peak. And I think just, one of the things that also doubles down on this idea for me is seeing how many interviews we've had with Mark Hamill recently, seeing how many times he's talked about, being done with Star Wars and, being bummed about the way it ended and all that type of stuff. Knowing that Harrison Ford now is in his mid-80s, seeing how he has started to look a little bit older, knowing Carrie Fisher's gone. I mean, I just desperately want one last version of Luke to see that full culmination of the Luke Skywalker, Master Luke, that we never really got to see. And I want to see that done at some point, even if it's one scene. So it would be really cool to have him back. Let's go through your guys' chats here. There are a lot about this topic. Let's see, my computer's glitching out a little bit, so I'm trying to scroll down. Let's see. I believe it was. I think it was. So we started with Dan the Man, who says, "It's an honor to finally get to chat with you guys today. I just put together the future of Star Wars. One Gosling character in Starfighter is delivering the kid to Finn, not Rey. Why do you want him delivering him to Finn instead of Rey? Why would they not both be together as well? And do you think Finn at this point, only like a year or two, at most it's going to be 5 years, I would think. I'm pretty sure they said a year. I feel like that was what they said. Maybe they said 5 years, but at most it's going to be that time period. You really think Finn would be powerful enough to be like a full-on Jedi at that point?
So it is 5. It's not 1.
Okay, even better. 5 years. I still don't see. I don't know. Do you think Finn, Dan the Man, would be powerful enough to be the Jedi that everybody's trying to find in the galaxy to deliver Luke Skywalker's son? And I don't even know if, in my head, I don't even know if she's Mara Jade, right? What if they just hire Ryan Gosling to be their pilot, and then during a conflict they're separated? It's not that she hands off her child to Ryan Gosling. What if he is an old friend of the Jedi, possibly, and he is helping them, and then they're separated, and now he's like, why are you so special with this kid? And we start to learn more and more and more about this kid. Meanwhile, Amy Adams isn't dead. She's just off somewhere because they got separated in the conflict, and she's trying to reunite with them, because I would love to see her more a part of the story, regardless, because she's a great actress, whether she's Mara or not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know your reasons, Dan the Man. I know you're bringing up characters like Galen, and become Star Killer, Snoke Apprentice. You're throwing out a lot of names that are very popular. I will say that, but why exclude Rey? Why? I mean, she would be the one who's got the leg up. I'm sure like Finn would be much closer with training to Rey, but she is still the established Jedi at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, and she has been training under Leia with the ancient text from Octo. So I don't. I'm not really understanding why specifically, right? And you also bring up points about balance, Force Order. Are you saying like a little bit of light and dark, like Gray Jedi? Because I think Liam and I both are like, Gray Jedi as a concept. Um, I know what you're saying, Dan, man. You have to keep reading. We're trying. It's not just you. It's also Critical Thinker. It's also Freezy. There's a lot of people in the chat, so keeping track of all of it is a little hard. So I do apologize, but yeah, I mean, let me scroll here. I feel like I'm missing things. I see you put in Gunji here. There's a lot of names for sure. Let's see. Okay, but I'm still not seeing anything about Ray specifically. Like, what is your reason for Finn over Ray? Like, what is Ray doing right at this point? That becomes my question, because she is, whether you love her or hate her, she is the Jedi of the era. I don't think, and if we are gonna explore more of like the Finn Stormtrooper rebellion concepts that were in Duel of the Fates that didn't that seemingly were in Rise of Skywalker before, from shooting script to whatever became the finalized version of the Rise of Skywalker, I don't see necessarily Finn just being like an apprentice. I feel like there's going to be a little bit more of like first order shenanigans personally that could come about, like what he's trying to do if this galaxy is fractured, where he's more applicable, I guess is the right word, would be more on the front lines, more on like saving others and bringing about change, versus Ray, where it's like now you've got the responsibility and the supposed duty of making the new Jedi Order if that film is still in that pipeline, right? So I'm just trying to ask for clarification, right? Like you're saying Finn could have help from Force Ghost, Ray's help, split different ideologies. Ray something's bigger, at least Finn in charge. Uh,
He said Rey's
I
fighting
mean,
the Grisks and Finn is kind of the
yeah.
Jedi in charge of the galaxy at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I mean the Gris conflict. Then I mean that would be pretty cool. We don't really have a proper visualization either of the Grisk, other than that half completed Thrawn Alliances comic. Uh, I don't know. I mean, are you saying she's like almost doing like a sort of Empire of the Hand situation, except she's with the Chiss and she's on the front lines there? Because no matter what, like if she is fighting off this Grisk, if they are more Vong coded of some sorts, right? You still need to have some sort of buildup. I don't think Ray alone is going to be enough. And again, you want to tie in as much Thrawn here into the story as possible, even if he's not alive per se, right? So okay, if you're saying different, like there's a different places to be, that makes sense. Different ideologies, I can see that to some degree. Like maybe he's more militant versus she's more like, yeah, like you're saying, she's more trying to think about how the Force can help save the day. I can see all that. That'd be pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that. You're throwing out a lot of ideas. I'm not 100% sure uh where we're gonna be in the timeline. Like, it all kind of depends on Starfighter being a success, guys. If it's just like a 500, $600 million film, I don't think we're gonna spawn all of these major ideas. It is technically still standalone. So yeah, I know we've been very excited about Mara Jade possibly being Amy Adams, right? And we have this kid be the son, supposed Ben Skywalker fill in. All that could still happen. I'm just, I just worry personally with the fact that we don't have any serious data about Star Wars in movies since 2019, and we saw diminishing returns between each sequel, and we're getting a sort of test flight with Mandalorian and Grogu. Just how much can be packed into this film that will be tied to like a bigger initiative. Like Liam said, I do think it's going to be more referencing what was left behind by the sequels, how that changes the galaxies. You might have some cameos there for sure, but for the most part, if you want people like Critical Thinker to be appeased and all that, um, you kind of do want to make it as new and fresh and standalone as it can be, with teases for the future, making it so that this now becomes like a central cog of storytelling. Like that's my one worry. Like if it's been designed to be standalone but can be expanded out, that's one thing. I'm not really sure Sean Levy, as much as I really do praise his action and Stranger Things and all that, I don't think he's really the guy I want to see spearheading all of this like post sequel revivalism. Like there should be a very experienced hand. There should be a whole team, and it should be like something almost High Republic esque, where it's like these are our creators, these are the projects. This is almost like our MCU esque timeline of like a phase one, phase two, phase three, and then you can start incorporating EU sequel and all that. I don't mind Mara Jade being in this film. I don't mind Ben Skywalker of sorts being in this film. I just don't know how much you can really do without taking away from the name of Starfighter 2. We still don't really know why it's called Starfighter. Like we have zero visuals other than Flynn Gray and Ryan Gosling on some sort of barge in water. And that again does not line up with Starfighter at all. So we'll see.
What if Starfighter was like a name almost, like almost how we have like Skywalker, right, or Star Killer? What if Starfighter was almost like a code name or a name people gave a certain mission, a certain project, or a certain person? Uh, and that's kind of what the movie's about. Because Starfighter's such an unassuming name. You really, when this movie was announced, you get a movie called Starfighter. It sounds like it's going to be
Yeah.
this throwaway story. But the more and more we hear about this film, it seems like it's so big. It's going to have so many things in it. Maybe it's a code name. Maybe it's a name somebody's going by. Maybe it's a mission name. I don't know. I think it could have more meaning than just they're going to be on a starfighter. Because that's what I've thought the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
time.
If it was literally, because that's the thing too, right? Like Levy's had the Trevor project, which is quite literally the same thing with some time travel shenanigans
Yeah.
about transporting someone. So is he gonna do the same thing again if he's been planning out these ideas for like 10 plus years and throwing them out to Kathleen. Hopefully not, right? Starfighter, or like, what if it's about a singular starfighter? That'd be such a like a okay, I guess. Like, is this? I mean, to be fair, it could also be something like that because we did see that shot of Levy on the set. I don't know if it's Levi or Levy. I always get it mixed up, but
Yeah.
of him like running on the side of the wall, and it's a very different architecture than we've seen in prequels, sequels, original trilogy. So
That
it
was a
could be,
Mutt-esque.
yeah, exactly. Like it could be like something that's tied to like some ancient era of
Yeah.
Star Wars
Yeah.
that's now popping up here. So that way you can have like, okay, if this works out, we can branch into things, right? So I don't know. Starfighter is not a name that I can say I love or hate because nothing has been given so far. I wish we had something like to give me like some direction, but all this speculation, I can't. I really don't know. The title is the one that's throwing me off. Like I hate to say it, when I see Mandalorian Grogu, I know what it's about. It's about Mandalorian Grogu. It's a terrible title. It could have been the Mandalorians or something else, right? But it's very clear. Star Wars since the streaming era, especially, just has had such a weird time with naming things, right? Why is the show called Ahsoka if it's going to also be Rebels season 6, basically, and have all this New Republic stuff? What, like, Skeleton Crew is probably the only thing that really makes sense there, right? Book of Boba Fett, it's not really his book, is it? If it's half of it's taken over by Mando, I just want to know what the naming really means, and they're teasing us, but maybe start like teasing us in a specific direction because I have no clue what Starfighter means at this point. But to your point, Liam, I do like the idea of it being like resistance or like some freedom revolutionaries. It like identifying as a starfighter if this galaxy is fractured between so many different governments and piracy and all that. That could be really cool. Like if you're like it's like almost like a secret order of sorts that isn't quite Jedi, but maybe is trying to do by the Jedi without them fully back in restored power or something, right? Like there's many interesting ways to play off that name, but Starfighter definitely when it was announced was the first thing I was thinking like, is this like a Rogue Squadron sequel to which we'll never see? I don't know. I've been thrown for a loop for this name for months now.
Yeah. It could be the MacGuffin of the movie. It could be something they have to find. It could be a mission. It could be a code name. I think it could be just about anything. It's generic enough, and it would be our only Star Wars movie, I guess, unless you count Solo, even though it has a Star Wars story after it. That would be a one-word title. So, yeah, it's very fascinating. Quickly, so we can get to some last people's questions because we are gonna have to wrap up here pretty soon. To respond to Dan, I actually like a lot of your ideas, Dan. Like, I think all of them are pretty cool. Personally, I love the idea of incorporating the Grisks in. I think it would be interesting to make Rey have this kind of higher calling to where she is out in the galaxy. She is on the forefront. I mean, I think in general, depending on what they do with Ben Solo, because maybe Rey is kind of out there and aloof because of her obsession with finding Ben if they decide to ever bring him back. But regardless, and that could take her to the unknown regions, could take her out to the Chiss, to the Grisks, so trying to find some type of way, some ritual, something that can pull Ben's spirit out from in her, create that dyad again. But I do think you have very cool ideas. The only one I will say I don't see happening is the twins. Like, I think that's done at this point. I don't see there being the twins. I don't see Jason and Jaina showing up. I do think, to me, they had their chance to do it, and it was to make Rey the sister, to make Rey Jaina, because they tease it in Force Awakens so many times over, where you could have done something where like Rey was Han and Leia's daughter who they thought died when really she ended up on Jakku somehow. Like they could have done something like that, because they have multiple times over where Kylo Ren has the meeting where he smashes the console with his lightsaber, and the Imperial officer, the First Order officer there is like, they were with a girl, and that's when he like really freaks out. That's when he chokes the guy, and there's multiple times over Maz Kanata's like, who's the girl? Like, there's so many moments where they really highlight Rey and try to make you think she is somebody obviously important, but also kind of maneuvering it towards being somebody related to Han. And so that was I mean, obviously it was the big theory almost everybody had because of Jason and Jaina, but it really did feel like Force Awakens was trying to lead you to that point. And then Last Jedi obviously tries to go in the complete opposite direction. So I feel like Rey has nothing in common with Jaina, critical thinker. All I'm saying is that they could have, in Force Awakens to Last Jedi, decided to make her the sister character. If they wanted to do twins, they could have done it there. Now I don't see any place where they can possibly, like Sonic said earlier, just say, oh yeah, and Han and Leia had twins and they were in hiding too. Like, the reason it works with Luke is because in Legends, Luke has a kid when he's way older. He and Mara don't get married until right before New Jedi Order. He doesn't have a kid. I don't think Ben Skywalker is born until 26 or 27 ABY, right in the middle.
Yeah.
It's in Edge of Victory Book 2. So it's almost halfway through New Jedi Order is when he's born. He doesn't really become a character until later, obviously, because he's an infant. And Luke, or Ben's fall to the dark side and the destruction of the temple happens in 28 ABY in canon. So it's like a year to 2 year difference, versus Jason and Jaina would have had to be born by 9 ABY in Legends, and Ben Solo's born in 5 ABY in canon. So the timelines just don't really make any sense. And it, with Ben falling to the dark side, with Han and Leia, seemingly having their issues before Ben's fall to the dark side, I don't really see them having like a secret set of children sometime in the meantime. Also, Leia and Han seemingly in canon are far more famous than Luke is, because Luke and the Jedi are kind of doing their own thing. They're not as prominent in galactic politics as they are in Legends. So I think there's just a lot of things around, like, if you were going to make there be a secret child from one of the big three, it's going to be Luke. And it also works a little better because, unfortunately, we didn't really get much Luke in the sequel trilogy. And we don't really have any of Luke in these last 30 years. So there's a lot more wiggle room for just saying, yeah, this happened, and we're going to tell why it happened later, rather than Han and Leia, who have a lot more story and ultimately have a harder time. Like, did we drop? Are we still good?
No,
We're still good,
right?
Okay. Sorry guys, I had a glitch on my computer, but I think we're still good. But yeah, Han and Leia had so much more story in canon. I just don't see how you could possibly tie in Han and Leia having a secret set of kids. But that's the only thing I think is completely out of the realm of things you're saying, Dan. I think there are a lot of other cool ideas. I mean, it would be interesting if a Star Killer, or in the vein of maybe Force Unleashed 2 Star Killer, where it's like a clone of some other powerful Force user, is the person who destroys Luke's temple, is the person who ends up maybe becoming a villain later on. Like you could kind of almost do the Mara Jade Emperor's Hand thing of, you will kill Luke Skywalker, that we see in the Thrawn trilogy, but after Rise of Skywalker, with a different character, not Mara Jade, but somebody who was a secret agent of Palpatine, who, even though Palpatine's dead, this person's not really a Sith, but maybe a dark side Force user who comes into the story. Maybe that's Mia Goth's character. There are a lot of things you can do to tie into Rise of Skywalker, tie into the sequels, tie into the Star Wars saga, that don't necessarily have to do with bringing Palpatine back, bringing the Sith back, bringing all that back. So I think there are a lot of cool ideas we can bring in. I always do hesitate to say, like, pull in iconic Legends only things and, like, let's bring them into canon, because especially when they're so different, right? Certain elements can work if you manipulate it, right? And major characters can work, but like a Star Killer has felt so Legends for so long. Not that I wouldn't want to see him in canon, but the more and more you start to compare them, the less canon feels like a unique timeline versus Legends as a unique timeline, right? So maybe if you do it in different, like dramatically different time periods, like this would be versus Starkiller and Legends, then it's a little less comparable. But I still think I would personally avoid that. But you could create a character who's very similar, and still bring them into canon. But yeah, a lot of cool ideas, guys. We're gonna, as Critical Thinker asked, we aren't pulling from the middle. We are just continuing this conversation that was started by the super chat. So, in fairness to you, Critical Thinker, we'll go back up because we do have to hard wrap up here in a few minutes. So we'll go back up and answer a couple of your last questions, and then we might have to call it a night, guys. But we really appreciate the conversation. So again, any last super chats we'll guarantee you on the show tonight. If not, we're going to try to get through as many as we can here in the next 10 minutes or so. If you want to continue the conversation, join the Discord where you can add your questions to either the post-live chat, which is on the Discord, or the fan question of the week, which can be brought up via the live streams and via a video itself. All right, so Critical Thinker said Lanterns trailer is interesting. Worried Hal being so old means he'll die. Show feels like it'll live or die on the comic accuracy of the characterizations for me. I don't think they'll kill Hal. I would be very upset and very out on the DCU Green Lantern story if they kill Hal, especially this early and especially with no Parallax. I mean, not necessarily. I don't really want to see Parallax. But if you're going to kill Hal with the Parallax, then at least we can assume he's coming back. If you kill him in an HBO show and we never get to see him in film, I'd be very upset. So I hope you're wrong, but I don't think the show is going to mean he dies. I could see him dying earlier in the DCU, though, but I don't think he'll die in season 1 of the show. I thought it was also interesting. I'm not a huge fan of the tone, honestly, but I knew I wasn't going to be when they announced the show. For me, I would have much preferred some type of space opera show. I would have preferred some type of, even the same tone, same story, but in space. I would have preferred that, but I think there will be aliens. I mean, we know Sinestro's in the show. We know there are going to be a lot of Green Lantern elements in the show. I'm just hoping, with this being a teaser trailer, they're just holding their big cards back and not revealing them to us too soon.
Yeah, I mean, this is the story that the writers chose, right? If they really wanted to do something on O or something, then they would have done it, right? Even if it has to be, with the limitations of streaming in some certain rooms or stuff, or make all the backgrounds glowing green. And I don't know how much glowing green they want to do. Like, they probably want to also limit the connotations of 2011 Green Lanterns visually, just to make things feel a little bit more grounded, I guess, which, it doesn't make sense per se, but you can't ignore general audience's history with the characters, right? Like, it's not just kids who are reading comics or watching animated shows. It's everybody who was like, yeah, I saw that Lantern movie like 15 years ago. Sure, it's long enough that you can kind of still ape the aesthetic for the most part, but I don't know just how far you can go with it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he dies. I think he does kind of go into his madness phase of sorts. He already seems primed for it. I'll say that. He seems like he kind of hates everybody, hates everything. He's kind of wisecracking, but he is an asshole right now. And he has those elements as a character, but I wouldn't say those are his defining elements when we see him really be a Green Lantern. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is it going to be also characters hidden away, like with human forms for Sinestro and all that? Like, are we going to do that first before it's revealed, right? Is this going to have that early streaming era before the bubble popped of like having, insinuate like this is going to be the character, and then they finally suit up or finally show who they are in the last episode or two? I don't know if that's going to happen either. I think this is a very misleading trailer, to be honest, and I think it doesn't help showing a kind of brown suit instead of a fully green suit too. So there's definitely things that people can like latch onto and be like, oh, I'm upset about it. That being said, I do think that when you make the flying look that good, and the ring is very clearly the same kind of ring that we see in the Lantern representation of Superman with Guy Gardner, I think there is a very clear plan. I'm gonna hope and trust in it. I don't know if I love a True Detective style show. I would have loved something like with Oa or the boundaries of Oa and like ran on crazy planets that could have aped a little bit more Western and thriller and whatever genres they want to pull from there. But I can at least understand that this is what was intended and this is what they're going to do. For the most part, yes, there have been some shuffling around that's been done with the DCU, but I haven't seen anything that has been like shot and then we're hearing stuff about, oh, it has to be reshot and there's a whole new vision like we saw with like Secret Invasion and a lot of the MCU shows. This feels like, yes, this is the first time we're not doing something with directly James Gunn's point of view, but this is in the model that was created for Gods and Monsters for this first wave of DCU. So I'm gonna keep the fate right now. I think we were misled a little too far, but how are you going to make something look that good when it comes to flight? Like that throws me off. I'm like, that looks really good. I didn't think anything about Guy Gardner's flight looked great to me in Superman. It looked adequate, right? It's like how we're seeing even the teases today of Spider-Man with like his ruffling suit and just the swinging that we're getting from Brand New Day pieces that they're releasing today versus the home trilogy, right? That's kind of what I'm seeing so far just from that shot. That's the first thing that made me light up like, oh wait, I should not count this out. It looks a little too clean, a little too good for not to have some intentionality there. And who knows? Maybe they're just hiding all the effects and we just see from episode 1 crazy things happening and you're like, oh, great. This is just like them manipulating negative energy online, which is the fastest way to get traction these days, unfortunately. And that's why they really wanted people to show up, right? I don't know. I'm still going to keep the fate right now, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you were here last week, Critical Thinker, because I think it was Brandon asked us about this trailer, and my theory was that it's maybe they're tracking down white Martians. Maybe these are white Martians, and that's why they're humans in the trailer. Obviously, shapeshifters. Then we can bring in the Martians. We can bring in Martian Manhunter maybe a little bit later, maybe into the show exactly. But I don't like the idea that Dan says giving Hal the Hank Pym treatment. I mean, you might be right. I just would be very sad if that were the case. Like, I don't want him to just be the mentor. But the main difference is, like, Kyle Chandler and Hal in this trailer is far more active than, hiring... I don't know how old Michael Douglas is, but he was pretty old when they hired him to be Hank Pym. So we kind of knew what we were getting.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. Whereas still with Kyle Chandler, like when he was hired, nobody said, okay, that's going to be like retired Hal Jordan. Like we expected actual action Hal Jordan. So I'm expecting that. I'm not expecting him to be on the sideline, even if in this show specifically, he's maybe the mentor character. But I think it's a strong possibility that, yes, this can still be John's show. And my theory last week was that maybe Hal is on the outs. Maybe this is Parallax adjacent, or maybe some type of story that connects Hal's troubles with the Green Lanterns and Oa, and that's why he's so like, oh yeah, why would I talk to those guys? They're aliens. One of them's a squirrel. Like, I think he, at this point, is probably at his lowest point with the Lanterns. Maybe they've forced him back to Earth just to be the Green Lantern of Earth and kind of rediscover himself and find his footing. Hal's always been a hot shot. He's Air Force. I said one of the dynamics with this is going to be Air Force versus, I believe John is Army. So it's going to be kind of an interesting military perspective, different types of philosophies from military. You got like Top Gun versus, very serious. And so I think there's going to be an interesting dynamic that's developed here. Obviously, you have Guy, who in the Tomasi Gleason run becomes a very, very good friend of John specifically, and John's able to kind of pull the hero out of Guy versus the asshole. He's not the asshole in that run. He actually becomes somebody who's very likable, like a lovable loser. And I think he's kind of like that now, but he's still more of Justice League International a guy. And we know that John really brings out the guy that's a hero. And I can't wait to see that dynamic unfold. So I could see this with this show being called Lanterns. I could see this being the staging ground for Hal Jordan, the thing that gets him back in the good graces of Oa. And then at the end of the show, he goes off into space and John is now the main character of this show. He's now the main Green Lantern of Sector 2184. And we also have now the Guy and John pairing maybe as the lead pairing for season 2, with possibly an introduction to Kyle later on. So I think a lot of that is on the table for what this show could be. Obviously, Sinestro is in the show. So seeing Sinestro, what does that mean? Is he a Green Lantern? Is he a Yellow Lantern? Is this maybe right after Sinestro's downfall? And that's why Hal's kind of bitter, because they were such good friends before his downfall. There are a lot of factors here that obviously we haven't seen. So I'm looking forward to seeing it all. I don't know if we're going to get all the alien stuff, maybe at the very end, maybe post-credit scene, but it could be. I think it's going to be the redemption show for Hal. Something has happened to him and to his time as a Green Lantern, and he's going to be rediscovering Hal Jordan, the hero, and we're going to find that John is able to bring out the best of Hal. He's also able to bring out the best of Guy, and it creates the Earth Green Lanterns that we all know and love, and hopefully that leads to Green Lantern stuff in the future with Hal specifically in space that can really adapt all that Jeff Johns stuff. But that's going to have to wrap up our stream tonight, everybody. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. We really appreciate all of you. Again, if you're watching and you haven't hit the like button, more people are watching than have liked the stream, so make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new or if you're joining us for the first time tonight. Dan, Breezy, a lot of you guys who haven't gotten a chance to join us in the past, make sure you join us every single Tuesday. We talk Star Wars. We take your guys' questions. It's always a fun time, so make sure you rejoin us again next week. Appreciate all the discussion tonight. Make sure you check out the rest of the content that's coming out this week, as well as all the polls and everything over on that side. We're still voting for the best Star Wars movie and TV show, the best seasons of Star Wars TV, and the best Star Wars characters. So make sure you check that out. Shorts as well are coming out. Thank you so much for watching the stream tonight, everybody. We appreciate your support, and we will see you all next time.